The sun is a white disk pressed against a cloudless sky. There is no wind, the sails hang slack, and the sea stretches in every direction like hammered bronze. Your lips are cracked. Your tongue feels thick and foreign in your mouth. You haven't had a proper drink since yesterday evening, and now it is past noon. A sailor tips a barrel, and what trickles into the cup isn't the clean water you remember from port. It smells faintly sour, carries a strange metallic edge, and tastes of tar and old wood. But you drink it anyway. You drink it because the alternative is the endless expanse of salt water surrounding you on every side, water that will speed your death faster than drinking nothing at all. This is the quiet nightmare of historical seafaring that most people never consider. We imagine the dangers of storms, of reefs, of hostile coastlines. We picture scurvy, shipwreck, and mutiny. But long before any of those catastrophes could unfold, there was another clock ticking beneath the deck: fresh water. Every barrel you carried was a finite promise. Every sip you took today was a choice that could not be undone tomorrow. And the ocean offered no mercy, only salt. So how did sailors cross thousands of miles of open water, spending weeks or even months beyond sight of land, without modern desalination, without refrigeration, without any of the technologies we take for granted? How did they make fresh water last? Most people assume there's a simple answer: endless stacks of barrels. Maybe some clever filter made of charcoal and sand. Perhaps discipline alone. But the truth is stranger, more intricate, and far more impressive. The real miracle wasn't a single invention. It was a system, a network of engineering, logistics, discipline, and hard-won knowledge about the sea itself. Sailors didn't just carry water, they treated it like the most precious cargo aboard. Because it was. To understand how water was preserved, you first have to understand how it fails. Fresh water doesn't simply go bad in some mysterious way. It deteriorates through specific, predictable processes, and a wooden ship accelerated nearly all of them. The moment water was poured into a barrel, a clock started. Microorganisms present in the source rivers, wells, rain cisterns began to multiply. Algae, bacteria, and biofilms slowly colonized the interior surfaces of the cask. The wood itself leached tannins and organic compounds into the water. If the barrel had been sealed with pitch or resin, those substances added their own flavors, sometimes tolerable, sometimes foul. And if the barrel was new, never used for water before, the contamination could be severe. Experienced maritime communities knew that a seasoned barrel, one that had held water on previous voyages, often produced better tasting, longer-lasting supplies than a fresh cask straight from the cooper's shop. But the container was only part of the problem. The ship itself was an enemy. Imagine the conditions in a hold during a long voyage. Heat radiating through the hull as the sun beat down, humidity from the sea and from dozens of men crammed into a confined space, salt spray working its way into every crack and seam, bilge water sloshing below, carrying its own cargo of rot. In this environment, even a small mistake became a crisis. A barrel with a slightly loose hoop would weep precious water into the darkness beneath the deck. A cask stored too close to the hull might warm in tropical sun and turn its contents into a breeding ground. One careless filling at port, drawing water from a polluted source, using a dirty bucket, failing to rinse salt from a funnel, could doom an entire barrel weeks before anyone tasted the result. This is why the technology of the barrel itself mattered so enormously. Coopering the craft of making and maintaining wooden casks was not a quaint folk art. It was high-stakes engineering. A proper water cask was a sophisticated piece of work. Staves of carefully selected wood, usually oak, were cut, shaped, and fitted together with precision. Iron or wooden hoops held them tight. When the cask was filled, the wood swelled slightly, creating a tighter seal. But this seal was never permanent. Ships moved, cargoes shifted, hoops worked loose. Staves dried and contracted during calm, windless days. Maintaining the barrels was a constant duty, and many crews assigned specific men to inspect them regularly, tightening hoops, checking for seepage, rotating stock so older water was consumed first. Some maritime traditions used pitch, resin, or wax to line barrel interiors or seal seams. This could help with waterproofing, but it came with trade-offs. Pitch and resin imparted strong flavors. Some crews grew accustomed to them. Others found the taste barely tolerable. In certain contexts, barrels were charred inside a technique that may have reduced biological activity and altered flavor. Archaeological evidence shows tremendous variation in these practices across cultures and centuries, a reminder that there was no single correct method, only regional and practical adaptations. And where you stored the barrel mattered almost as much as how it was made. The best location for water casks was the coolest, darkest, most stable part of the hold. Experienced sailors kept them away from the hull's sun-facing side, nestled among heavier cargo and ballast where they would stay steady during rough seas, protected from the bilge below. Some accounts suggest water barrels were stored on raised platforms or dunnage to keep them above seepage. Others describe them wedged into specific compartments designed for the purpose. The goal was always the same: slow the warming, slow the contamination, slow the clock. But even with perfect storage, water did not last forever, and this is where discipline entered the equation. Rationing was not a suggestion on a long voyage, it was law. Ship captains understood that thirst makes people irrational. A crew that believes water is running low will panic. Panic leads to hoarding, to theft, to violence. The solution was brutal simplicity. Establish a fixed daily allowance, enforce it without exception, and make the system visible so every man knew exactly where he stood. The specifics varied. Some fleets issued water in measured portions at fixed times. Others assigned a designated water steward who controlled access to casks and recorded every draw in a log. The penalties for stealing or wasting water were severe, though I'll spare the details. What mattered was that the system removed discretion. No one had to wonder if they were getting their fair share. No one had to guess how much remained. The ration was the ration, and that certainty was itself a form of psychological protection. There's something almost cruel about how thirst works at sea. The ocean is a constant taunt, water everywhere, and not a drop you can drink. Salt water accelerates dehydration. The body expels more fluid processing excess salt than it gains from drinking. Sailors knew this intimately, even without modern terminology. The sea was not a resource, it was a trap, and so crews found ways to reduce their need for fresh water in the first place. Hard labor generates sweat. Sweat costs the body water. Many accounts suggest experienced captains scheduled demanding work hauling lines, climbing rigging, shifting cargo for cooler hours when possible. Sailors sought shade where they could find it, rigged awnings on deck, rested during brutal midday heat. Evidence suggests some crews reduced intake of heavily salted provisions when water was tight, understanding that salt increases thirst. This wasn't always possible. Salted meat and hardtack were often all that was available, but the principle was recognized. More significant was the role of alternative beverages. In many seafaring traditions, water was not the only drink carried aboard. Weak beer, small ale, diluted wine, cider, and various fermented concoctions served as substitutes. The alcohol offered some preservation against spoilage, and brewing could render questionable water safer. A barrel of ship's beer might remain drinkable longer than plain water stored under identical conditions. This practice varied enormously by culture, era, and mission. Royal Navy vessels famously issued grog-watered rum as part of daily rations. Mediterranean traditions leaned toward diluted wine. Northern European sailors relied on beer. The common thread was that these beverages stretched water supplies, made marginal water more palatable, and provided caloric value. They were not luxuries, they were logistics. But no amount of planning could guarantee that water from port would last the entire voyage. And this is where the sky became a lifeline. Rain capture was one of the most important and most underestimated survival techniques at sea. When clouds gathered and squalls approached, experienced crews sprang into action. Sails were repositioned to catch runoff. Canvas sheets and awnings spread across the deck, angled to channel water into barrels and buckets. Any clean surface that could collect rain became suddenly precious. But there was a catch. The first minutes of rain were often useless, even dangerous. Weeks of accumulated salt, grime, and soot coated every surface. Initial runoff carried all of this into collection vessels, producing water barely better than seawater. Experienced crews learned to wait. They let the first rainfall wash decks clean, discarding early flow before beginning serious collection. Only once rain had rinsed the ship would they channel it into storage casks. Imagine the tension of watching clouds build on the horizon, praying that the squall would reach the ship, knowing a good rain could add days, even weeks to the voyage's margin of survival, and then watching clouds drift past, untapped, as the sun returned. This is also why route planning was never just about winds and currents. It was about water. Most ocean crossings weren't blind ventures into the unknown. They were carefully calculated journeys between known refill points. Islands with reliable springs, coastal stretches with accessible rivers, anchorages where trade or treaty guaranteed access to fresh water. Captains carried knowledge sometimes in written logs, sometimes in oral tradition about where water could be found and how risky each stop might be. The calculations were ruthless. A detour to resupply might cost days of sailing time, expose the ship to unfamiliar reefs or hostile populations, or push the voyage into dangerous storm seasons. But running out of water was worse. Every captain balanced these risks, and the best planned voyages so they were never more than a few weeks from a potential refill point. Now imagine this. You're 3 weeks into a crossing. Winds have been contrary, progress slow. A sailor working in the hold notices something wrong. Water in the bilge, more than there should be. A barrel near the bottom of the stack has been weeping for days, maybe longer. No one saw it, no one checked. And now, when officers count what remains, the numbers don't add up. A cask that should have held days of water is half empty. Maybe more is damaged. The margin of safety that existed when you left port has quietly vanished into dark timbers below. What happens next? The captain faces a decision tree with no good options. Cut rations immediately, stretching what remains but weakening the crew. Alter course toward nearest land, hoping for water but risking unknown dangers. Or push forward, betting on rain, gambling that winds will turn favorable before the last barrel runs dry. In practice, experienced crews did all of these at once. Every remaining barrel was inspected. Hoops were tightened. Leaking casks were moved where they could be monitored, their contents used first. Water draws were reduced and watched more closely. Canvas was rigged for rain collection. Work schedules were adjusted to reduce exertion. And someone stood watch with an eye on clouds, waiting for the squall that might never come. This is what most people miss. Survival at sea was not about heroic endurance. It was not about some mythical sailor who could go days without drinking through sheer toughness. It was about systems, redundancies, maintenance, discipline, the ability to respond to a crisis before it became a disaster. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks confirms how central these systems were. Remains of water casks are found arranged with care, wedged among ballast stones, sometimes with traces of pitch that lined them. Surviving ship logs describe water allotments in meticulous detail, recording quantities, refill dates, source quality, and barrel condition over time. These were not afterthoughts. They were the infrastructure of survival. The evidence also shows how often things went wrong. Ships that vanished without explanation, expeditions that turned back due to spoiled supplies, crews weakened by dehydration before facing any storm. For every successful crossing, there were failures, voyages where water didn't last, where discipline broke, where rain never came. Fresh water didn't last because the ocean was forgiving. It lasted because sailors approached thirst as an engineering problem, not a test of will. The hero of these stories is not the lone mariner suffering in noble silence. It is the system, the cooper who built a barrel that would hold for months, the steward who measured every portion, the captain who chose routes with refill points in mind, the sailor who spotted the leak in time. The next time you pour yourself a glass of water without thinking, consider this. For centuries, men crossed oceans knowing every drop aboard was borrowed time. They couldn't make more water. They couldn't conjure rain. They couldn't drink the sea. They could only protect what they had, ration it with iron discipline, and pray their planning would outlast the miles. Before desalination, before refrigeration, before any technology that makes modern voyages routine, the ocean was crossed on planning, maintenance, and restraint. And at the heart of it all was a simple, terrifying truth that every sailor understood in their bones. On a ship fresh water is time, and time is survival. If you've wondered how sailors navigated by stars alone, or what really happened when scurvy struck a weakened crew, those stories reveal the same hidden logic, the systems that made impossible voyages possible. But those are questions for another time.